Thanks so much. I'm going to stand up for this one. I'm going to do like a quick intro, let Andrea introduce herself. This is like a sobering section. It's all about stuckness. Both of us deal with stuckness, which is not the most enjoyable, but a legitimate topic. It's kind of known that only 10% of venture-backed startups are successful in the traditional sense, and in almost 80% of the cases, founders don't make a dime. And yet, founders believe they have an 82% likelihood of success. This is the chasm in which my book is being kind of what I went through as a young entrepreneur, what I wish I had known. A lot of the myths that I believed back then, myths such as really important to go after a big market, that you really should scale quickly, you should raise a lot of money, that you should follow the playbook on your way to success, all of which turned out to be the opposite of what was really true. So I was, as mentioned, first of all, a bootstrap entrepreneur, built a kind of healthy, profitable $12 million business, and we took venture money and reinvented the business and took it to IPO over the next 4 years. And then afterwards, entered a period of depression, because this is what happens with founders, right? You have purpose, you have meaning, everything's working well, you're super stressed most of the time, but at least you have purpose. And then you get to the goal line. Even if you succeed in the way you want to succeed, if you make all the money, you do all the things, it suddenly is not as valuable or as worthwhile as you thought it was. And I saw this happen in a lot of cases. Founders were either stressed or depressed, even if they were successful. And so what I tried to do was write a book that was shining a light on the systemic challenges that lead to this 10% successful situation that we're in, the internal challenges, the psychological blind spots that we all face, we run into, that are giving rise to those problems, right? If you go actually search Google right now for why startups get stuck, you'll see didn't have product market fit, ran out of money, founders can get along, things like that. What I try to do is peel back the covers and look way underneath into the egoic and psychological blind spots that we all run into that were driving the decisions that led to getting stuck. And so how do we as founders put ourselves in the best position, mentally, emotionally, for what is a very long ride, hopefully, and so that we make the right decisions on behalf of the business and really steward it towards its ultimate success. And then the whole path in the book that I outlined for what do I do? I started acquiring these stuff companies that raised much money first, and then restructuring them, getting healthy and sustainable. And then I consulted them. And then in the process, I saw hundreds and hundreds of companies as VC, as private equity professional. And after seeing hundreds of companies, realizing there's a lot of patterns and there's a lot that you can do to lead the way towards not getting stuck in the first place, that there are an infrastructure of things to do as a founder that give you the best chance of being in that 10%. So that's what my book was about. And I will hand it over to Andrea to talk about hers.
My book is called From Stuck to Scale. And if you can imagine, right on this campus, about 10 years ago, I was teaching the Lean Startup class. Raise your hand if you know it. It is a class that we started a long time ago to help people who had early stage ideas bring them through to commercialization. And before I was the CEO of a software SaaS company, there had been kind of an informal movement that had started called Lean Startup. And in that day, there was a book called The Business Model Generation. Raise your hand if you've seen that. Business model canvases, MVPs, pilots, pivots. Raise your hand. I'm sure you've seen them all. At the same time, I was also doing work with IDEO on design thinking and all of that. And then we were doing Agile and running a software company. We had sprints and we had, and somehow, some way, I still lost a $20 bet, which really pissed me off. Because what happened was, here I am, 13,000 teams on our platform, and I'm really very sure that every single thing about what will make a company succeed from early stage, 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, would be exactly what you would do on steroids to get it to scale, meaning outsized returns, growth flywheel, ecosystem that's healthy. You don't have to worry about average recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue because it's automatic. You're locked in. And so what I did is we went to one of our cohorts, which in my idea was, let's go to corporations. let's see what happens when you take this I-Corp program that was originally for universities and take it to corporations. So I won't name this one, but it's a large healthcare corporation. And we went in and there was a cohort of 16 teams, which was the model. And I said, okay, guys, I'm really confident. I'm going to put a $20 bet on the teams that I know are going to win this one. And after 20 weeks, they're going to be the ones that go to scale and have the most future. Because unfortunately, I thought that the best ideas, the best science, the people with the best credentials would become the best companies. And of course, I lost that bet. And the fantastic ideas that were left on the cutting room floor, we were like, oh, well, they didn't make it. And this happened like time and time again. And I know we're supposed to fail fast and learn fast, but it really bothered me personally. And I love what Dave says, because it was like deep. How can we face these teams and say, oh, good luck, There were a couple of things that I realized, which is the science that took us to point 10, 1 to 10, was not always the science that was required when we had to pivot. So there's a great example in the book of From Stuff to Scale about stevia, which is sugar substitute. And the person who developed it at Cargill, or the team that developed it, they have a polymer chemistry background, soil science background. And it was great because you grow the stevia, and suddenly they said, well, wait a minute, what if we could do this in a more innovative way? Well, you say, please pivot away from soil. Well, if you tell soil scientists to pivot away from soil, they're going to get clinically depressed because they don't know what else to do. So it turns out that the way you get to scale is what I've tried to unlock in the book, and I'll talk about it during the panel, but what their punchline was, by the way, which is public information, is they realized that they could develop the same sweetness in stevia through fermentation. And so they brought in people who knew about like beer, which I'm sure was really hard for them to do. No, I'm kidding. They brought in people with different skills to help them with the pivot. And so what we're here to talk about today is not from the personal side, but also structurally, what we can do to help really important initiatives, not just be told go pivot or die and lose $20 bet after $20 bet, but to actually have tools like, okay, how exactly do I pivot? And so that's what we're going to talk about during the panel.
Thank you so much. 13,000 teams is a lot of teams. What were the patterns that were maybe unexpected that had the biggest impact on those trajectories for those teams?
I think this is so fascinating. By the way, my book came out, unlike Dave's book came out. Mine came out yesterday, and it's just like literally you're the first people I'm talking about. So I'm super excited. So the first thing was, the pattern of what we thought when we were selecting teams. So we picked teams for charisma. And and you get a free book. Woo! Mm-hmm. Yes, you get a free download of the book. Thank you very much. And it'll be digital and it'll come out in about 3 weeks. But yeah, definitely do that. So the first thing was the inadvertent mistake that we made by picking people who could pitch really well, right? And they had product market fit for the short piece, and they had all of the customer discovery and all of the things, but we didn't help figure out if they had the chops to become like really big. Like billions of dollars is very different from 100 million. Like it's just very different. And it's like escape velocity. I saw somebody here with like an airplane. Escape velocity or for a rocket is very different from going really fast. So I think part of it was that we selected people for being great pitchers and not necessarily understanding that the ability to be, we used to call it, tough skin and round heels, that you had to feel humility, but we didn't know that we had to actually teach a polymer chemist to invite a fermentation person into the room with them. We didn't know how to piece that together.
Yeah, it's like interviewing salespeople. I was telling them, it's like, this is what they do, right? So just interviewing salespeople to try and hire them is really hard because they all look really good, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
They're good at selling because they're a sales rep. So I have a question for you, Dave, about Reignition. By the way, it's a fabulous book. And what I love about it is it's a combination of humility and honesty. There's something that you say so well in the book that it has to do with ourselves kind of having internal conversations with ourselves. And I wonder if you could share with everybody, if you, like, as a first-time founder or as a founder, what do you wish you had known or someone had told you?
Yeah. I go back, and even, the company Jive that I'm known for, very successful, went public on, NASDAQ, all these things. When I replay the tape, we were literally started at the same time as a company called Atlassian. We know Atlassian? Yeah, right. So they were 2 guys, we were 3 guys, right? And we were doing the exact same thing for the first, 5 years of our existence. And then I pivoted up market to the enterprise. And, that was a decision that kind of changed the trajectory of the company. It was a pivot in a big way, and, changed how we went. And it moved us away from our core, moved us away from what we were the best in the world at doing at the time and trying to be something that we weren't. And it was because when I replayed the tape that I was deeply insecure, that I really, really just wanted to win. I wanted to be seen as being successful. And this is what I talk about when I talk about the limiting beliefs that may drive some of our decisions. What I'm trying to show you is that we took a direction that ultimately, yeah, we went public, but then it kind of died on the public markets after my time, right? Where Atlassian went on to, they're worth 50 billion today. And you can actually see where the inner side of what we do starts to affect the decisions we make. We may want to raise more money than we should. We may want to grow more quickly. We want to be perceived as successful. It's really important, right? But the most important thing I could have done is to be in touch with my intuition, to be actually leading the company from a much deeper place where I'm stewarding the company. I'm not identified with it. And I would say that to me is the most important thing. When you start to identify with the company, as in its success or failure equals me, you start to make decisions that are not in the best long-term interest of the company. And I wish I had known that early on. I wish I had somebody that could have told me, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. You're Ken up, right? With that version from the Barbie movie, right? But I needed that at the time.
Wait, you just like quote
Barbie?
movie?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Right? Is that okay? Because that's pretty dated now, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that would have been the best. That obviously, in the book, this is what I try to do is point, connective tissue between how, content we are as a leader and how grounded we are as a leader, and how we bring that to the people that we work with, and how we bring it to the decisions we make that ultimately get the company on the best journey towards its destiny.
We have a really limited time. I have like 8 questions to follow up. But
now you get your version of it now. Yeah. Well, what do you wish you had known as when you were starting? I know that you went through a lot in your journey, and as a scale up on pretty large scale. What were the things that you wish you had known?
So I was talking about this. So I started a company. I won't even tell. I was like 19 when I first started a company, and I wish that I had known that I could get help. I don't know why I thought I had to do everything myself. And I've been watching this group of like everyone I have met today is doing like 8 side hustles, taking full-time nibs, doing, working, interning. It's like so much that I feel I could have kind of calmed down a little bit at that stage. And I also think that what you just said about intuition is really deep, Dave, because somehow when we're pleasing others, which happens when we get investors, which happens when we get big clients. I think my first big client was Royal Dutch Shell, and I felt like I had to act like McKinsey all the time. I don't know why I thought that, because they hired us specifically to not be McKinsey. But I think it's when you start getting like an image of what you should be being that I wish someone had counseled me and said, look, we wanted you because of who you are, and keep it going and trust yourself. I think I really would have valued that. I needed like Yoda. So you're quoting the Barbie movie. I'm going to quote Yoda.
I like the 2 of them together.
Okay, so I have one. This is about mistakes. You have counseled, I might have had all these teams. You counseled like hundreds of startups and founders. So you've talked about patterns, but what mistakes do you see? Like, are there certain mistakes, and how can people avoid them, kind of broad scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to scaling prematurely. So having seen, hundreds, maybe thousands at this point of startups and trying to help them and get them through these difficult times. A lot of it has to do with them raising more money before they should. In order to raise that money, telling a story about where the company really is that belies the actual truth. And so I think the longer you can go, so in my slides, I kind of talk about, when people raise an A round, it kind of puts a really high bar for what they need to achieve. And if they told a story that was too far removed from where the company really is to get that A round, that's when it starts to collapse. Sometimes maybe they can raise more money, but then it collapses on itself again. If you can go leaner longer and be in curiosity mode for as long as possible and wait until you feel the pull of the market, a lot of startup pushing is in scientist curiosity mode, taking around for a long time, probably longer than you think, or focusing on one very small market and doing really well in that small market because that's the best place to work from in order to get the company on a faster growth trajectory. And usually what happens, people jump the gun, they raise money, and then they just try to hire sales and marketing and try to push products on an unsuspecting market. But if you can do that thing, you can just wait through that difficult early stage, and whatever investment you get, align with the learning objectives that are consistent with where you are in the company. Get them excited about what you're learning, not about what you're selling. And the longer you can do that, I think the much higher likelihood, the higher the likelihood of success.
Well, I'm going to build on that before I ask, or I already, it's your turn to ask me one, but I'm going to build on one.
Okay, you asked my question for me.
Oh, okay, I'll ask myself a question. No, wait, what are we doing? So, one of the things that I remember, someone pulled me aside, it was my CTO at the time. And he said, don't let the cap table keep you up at night. Like, you have to know about things like this, but you can literally obsess over like run rate and, these things when you kind of have to put that in a place, like maybe deal with that on Thursdays. But there's a lot that you have to do to not let the pressure of the cap table and the run rates and the timing and the pressure and the payback cycles and who else is doing what, that outside voice is very hard to quiet. To build on what you're saying, it's hard. It's really challenging.
Yeah. One of the things an exercise I will do with a lot of founders is say, imagine the company as a movie. And we've already talked about marketing notice. So imagine the company as a movie. What's it about? Why are we watching it? And if you think about the whole company design, from its early stages to the end, and not just where we are right now, we have to jump the gun here and here and here, or we have to get to these things because then we can raise money, right? That's the tail wagging the dog, right? And so I think the longer, you can go with building that intuition, being really close to understanding where the company is and financing it accordingly and austerely, ideally, as you get to a place where then it's irresponsible not to raise money. It's going so fast, then maybe that's a better time to raise money.
I ask myself a question because I know you want to ask me this.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is I'll ask you. So you wanted to ask me, like, Matt, like what's a company that people in this room might not have heard of that would give a story that tonight they can go tell someone and it would be like amazingly inspiring? Is that what you had just
wanted to ask? Exactly what I was going to ask you.
Yeah. Okay. So it's called Rappi. Do you know Rappi? RAPPI? Raise your hand. Okay. So years ago, I was working with a group called Open Finance Mexico. I don't know if you know these people. Okay, you might be from Open Finance Mexico, but Mario, do you know these guys? Anyway, so I remember I was doing a lot of stuff in fintech at the time, and the bankers from Mexico City, and this isn't a bad thing, this is kind of what would happen. Oh yeah, there's this little startup, they have this little app, it's like a thing, and it was kind of like, it's never gonna be big and whatever. So the talk in the conference was, there's this little startup. Okay, 3-beat story. Beat number 1, true story. The founders of the company stood on the streets of Bogota, Colombia, literally giving away donuts if you would download their app. This is a true story. Correct? Correct. Okay. And what they did is they put sandwiches on their backs and they had bicycles and they would go deliver food door to door. And then COVID came and like it turned out a lot of people needed that. Okay, then they get to the door and it'd be like, Dave would go, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have any money. And it's like, okay, no problem. We just invented Stripe. Well, they didn't invent it, but they figured out they needed that. And then he's like, oh, and for this payment thing to work, I have to like connect to my bank. You know where this is going. Okay, so then they discovered something that I think everyone can learn, because to me, it's like mind-boggling how they built this company. They didn't do it through acquisition. They built it through this thing that I call emerging available market. We know TAM and SAM. Okay. EAM is when that Dave ordered, this is a true story. Dave ordered, I don't know, ceviche for $8. I bring it to his house. What do I sell Dave next? Next week's lunch, right? So I put him on a subscription, which annoys him, but he does it. Okay, fine. So then what do? Then I sell him a drink. Then I sell him dinner. So, that's the way we've been taught. Here's what they did. And this guy, Guido Beisho, who's the guy who's profiled in my book, he's like, hey, wait a minute. I wonder if Dave would like a trip to Lima, Peru. It's like, it turns out he did. And they developed Rappi Travel. And it's like, wow, I wonder what Dave's doing Saturday night. I think he's going to a concert at the Fox. Hey, let's sell him a ticket. Honestly, they have an omni-channel platform. They are now worth $5.2 billion. And literally, the story that they told is exactly what Dave is telling, that they started off organically with integrity, and the way that they built their ecosystem is with honoring all of the partners. And it's a really cool story. And to me, it's very different from me in Silicon Valley, in the way that we've been taught to go big or go home.
I like it. Yoda says, follow the donut. Remember that.
Donut, follow it.
Yeah, something along that. Yeah. Someone can do that better than me, I'm sure. Okay. No.
Okay. I did want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
So you talk about a company's core, and it's a really deep concept, because it's not anything I was ever taught or have taught in business. I wonder if you could share that, because you talk about it really well in terms of finding your North Star.
Sure. Yeah. So I talked a little bit about, being in touch with your own core as a leader, which you could call your soul, your essence, use whatever new age word you want to use for it. It is basically that thing that is unique to you, right? As a leader, that's what you want to be in touch with. A company has the same thing. So ideally, your company has done something well. These are the companies that I work with, right? They're at the point where they have gotten some amount of product market fit, right? So, and just put it into context, right? I mentioned 10% are the successful ones. On the other hand, you maybe have 30 to 40%, which just never get off the ground. They were science experiments that didn't work. In between is this 50% of companies that had good bones, they had good promise, but maybe get scaled prematurely and lost their way. And they just had too much investment dollars. And that's the group that I work a lot with. It's almost like middle distance runners who were forced to run a sprint. They raised a lot of money and they came out of the blocks, should be running a 1500, but they're coming out like it's a 100-meter dash. And they die before they even make it around the track. So that was what I worked with. And what I found was that they did one thing really well. That's their core. They had a superpower. That was their essence as a business. And what would typically happen is that they would raise money and try to grow really fast by extending beyond their core too quickly. Right. And so the more time you spend in that initial market with your core business, what it does is allow you to understand the infrastructure of what success looks like for your product, even if it's just one small buyer tech. Doesn't have to be a lot of money coming into the door early on, but it allows you to feel what victory feels like within that market, and then you can start moving to adjacent markets that are directly connected to your core. In almost all the cases of the companies that I saw, they moved way too quickly beyond what they were the best in the world at, and what led to getting into trouble later on. So I've got a lot of stories about that in the book. From every angle, about understanding what your core is, how long it takes to get to having a core. If you guys are a lot of early stage founders just getting started, what does it take to solidify your core as a business, and then how do you stay with that core, and then use that as the basis to expand, because that's a much better path than trying to go to one market, then go to the next market, and then do this or pivot, try to
too many things too quickly. Yeah, so a lot of that is in the book. I don't know, I mean, you have a similar concept in your book. Your book just came out. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but you know, you must have something that is akin to what my kind of groovy new age soulful.
I don't really groovy new age soulful because we need that, right? So what I would say is that these are like a lot of canvases. There's 44 canvases, and the one that made the most difference in these 13,000 teams, it turns out, well, there are two things. One is that you have to spend one day a week working on the business, not in the business. And I actually also, what we've discovered is that you need different people around you to work on the business. So like literally on Fridays, this one guy, Nicholas Cotata, who was with the company Intergraphicus, and if you can imagine a company that was about to go bankrupt faster, they were the largest CD producer in Latin America. So like Shakira's music, but do you know what a CD is? No, like who has a CD? Nobody. So to be the best in a falling market is terrible, right? It's like catching a falling knife or something. Okay, anyway. So the thing that he said that made a huge difference, because we turned the company around 6x EBITDA. Once again, it's not billions of dollar company. It's a healthy company, but he wanted to save jobs. And what he did was he said one day a week, Fridays, he worked on the business with different people that surrounded him with different questions and questioned his humility, questioned his decisions. But that was different from his operations team that was, you know, where he was working on the business. And so to that, the second part that made a huge difference in successes of early stage companies is something that we call the commitment narrative. And rather than pitching to people, we stop pitching and we start getting people to commit. And commitment feels very resonant with what you're talking about. When someone literally has your back, and even an investor, you know, because I invest in companies now, if I really am committed to it, like we're going to go to the end of the earth for this company. I work with a company called Embrace, which is it almost died in early death many times, and then at a certain point, Mark Benioff and Tony Robbins ended up coming in accidentally and buying into the company. But like we had near-death experiences all the time. The people around the concept were committed, and that's very different from investing.
Yeah.
All right, so what's your closing one?
My closing story? Ooh. What do you guys know? You want to talk about
Barbie? I think Barbie.
Finding product market fit? You want to talk? Okay. So there was a company that I profiled in my book called DocSend. Anybody know DocSend? They were a really cool company that changed, you know, instead of attaching files to emails, you do a link, an embedded link, and they collect all the interest on it. This was their starting point. So they built out these really amazing self-service flows early when it was used by, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. It was all freemium. And then they raised venture, and like a lot of companies that raised venture was like, all right, how can we be big and successful and go after sales teams in the enterprise? So they raised $8 million and went after sales teams in the enterprise and got clobbered because there's already a bunch of companies there doing that thing, and it's really hard to do that thing. And they felt like they were playing a golf tournament with clubs half the size. So they spent a lot of money on sales and marketing, just wasted it, and it's just too hard. And so they kind of went back to the core. This thing you're talking about, what would be great? It was these self-service flows. It was allowing people to do this. Okay, I'll wrap it up really quickly. You know, on their own and through certain use cases. So they did this thing called Project Couch Change, right? Which was to just try to identify opportunities on their own that would add $50,000 to ARR. Not very much. Just like, let's go growth hack our way to doing these things. They learned things like big enterprise customers actually don't want it, like they're scared that we don't have a security feature because we're not charging enough. Or if we just had a few more features in our middle tier, we would get thousands of people to upgrade. And so just a couple of people going out and doing a little customer discovery based on their core. This is the thing that's really important. Two things. One, it's based on what they were the best in the world at doing. And secondly, they had a very small team away from the core team doing this investigation. And within a couple of months, it wasn't 50,000, it was 500,000. And suddenly they were profitable and growing, and they had term sheets, one for $20 million, and they ended up just doing $5 million. And they didn't even touch the $5 million. They just stayed profitable, grew over the next year to 13 million in sales, and then Dropbox acquired them for 165 million. So this is my point about when you know your core and you don't try to get too far beyond it and tell a story that lies where you really are, this is our strength, this is our superpower, we figured it out, and you work from there. And you start thoughtfully experimenting with growth, wait for that pull of the market, that's when value is really created.
Mic drop.